Welcome to Build. I'm Laura Haywood. Today I'm joined by an incredible man. He's an award-winning poet, actor, singer, and playwright, currently starring as George Washington in Hamilton on Broadway. We're also celebrating the upcoming release of his book and EP, both titled Target Practice, which feature a heartbreaking, raw, gorgeous, and unapologetic window into the life as a Black man in America. This is a special man right here, you guys. Next to me is Carvens Lissaint, and I am so thrilled that he is here. Welcome.
What's up? How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Great.
How are you doing?
Woo, I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I'm doing great. I'm a little tired, a little exhausted. You know, it's been overwhelming, doing 8 shows a week over at Hamilton and, trying to get everything out for the book and trying to get everything out for the EP and sort of pulling double duty, doing readings, still auditioning. It's been overwhelming. It's a blessing, though. It's definitely a blessing. All the blessings come in challenges, but it's an honor. It's an honor to do the work. Yeah.
So speaking of auditioning, you have a crazy Hamilton audition. It's not even a story. It's like a saga.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah, it needs to be
without
TV
using
series.
up our entire 20 minutes, can you give a brief synopsis of your audition process for the show?
Yeah, I mean, I was going in to the show while I was still in grad school at NYU, actually right down the block, which is great. I have some of my NYU folks here. So
yeah, we have a packed house.
Yeah, it's here. It's lit. It's very lit. I love my people. We come out, baby. We come out. But no, I was going in while I was in grad school. I think I went in about a total of about 8 or 9 times. But I sort of did my final callback, or you will, like maybe around April, and they were like, "We'll let you know." It's always the "we'll let you know," but I pretty much went in, and I originally went in for the roles of Hamilton and Burr, I think as for the standby, and I was like, "That's weird. I don't see myself doing Hamilton, but whatever. I could rap, so let's do this." So I went in, and they were like, "How about you come in again?" And went in again. I think the second time they were like, let's change the material." Then they gave me Washington and Burr, and then I did that for about maybe 2 or 3 times. Did a couple of work sessions. So then I did the dance call. I'm out there, dancing. I ain't a dancer. I can move. But so yeah, I did that. And then they sort of like, "We'll let you know." So it was like around April. They said, "Hey, we'll want you to come back in May, and we want you to come in with the roles of like Lafayette Jefferson, Mulligan Madison, Washington, Burr," because they throw all this material at.
I'm surprised they weren't like, "Can you also learn Mariah Reynolds and Peggy while you're?"
I almost did. I did it actually a little bit, but yeah, I did that. I did that, and then I didn't hear back for about like 2 months. And then I was auditioning for this other Broadway show, and I booked this other Broadway show, and then Hamilton called me the same day I booked that Broadway show, and they were like, "Hey, so can you come in tomorrow?" And I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna come." And then so then I went, and I was in the room with Lack for about, I think an hour. He was like, "All right, let's do this. All right, let's do this." And then I did that, and then Tommy came in, and they were like, "Oh, well, Tommy's here, so can you do it all over again?" And I brought my wife with me because I was like, no one is going to believe me. So, yeah, I was in the room for about an hour, and then I had to choose between both shows. And I did. I chose Hamilton. And, yeah, I started with Hamilton in July of 2017, right after grad school. I was with the Broadway company for 8 months as a standby, covering the roles of Burr, Washington, and Lafayette Jefferson. Did that for 8 months, and then they graced and they honored me with the privilege to go out with the Angelica Tour. So I went out with the Angelica Tour. I think I was in Denver, St. Louis, Atlanta, Washington, D.C., and Houston. And then now I'm back with the Broadway Tour.
And you're on 8 shows a week.
8 shows a week.
As the general.
8 shows.
Yeah.
All 8 shows.
What do you do to take care of yourself?
Jesus. I pray a lot. I pray a lot. It's not a game. I can't do it on my own strength. And I am over. I mean, it's hard physically. I'm dealing with a lot of injuries. I actually injured myself first year of grad school playing basketball with some of these knuckleheads in the front. They're laughing because he was there. But yeah, so I have like herniated discs in my back, and I had like knee injuries from basketball from high school. So really, I mean, I try to take real good care of myself in terms of prayer, because my spirit and my soul needs it. But really, I'm like icing at night. I'm foam rolling. I'm in PT every single day. I'm in acupuncture 2 times a week.
Wow.
And then I try to see a massage therapist as much as I can, just to sort of, and then for my mind, therapy. I started therapy last month, so that was great. My wife was like, "Boo, you need therapy." I was like, "You are so right." So yeah, and really, man, I have such a have such a support system with my wife. My wife is a big part of my mental health. She keeps me grounded because I'm always reminded why I'm doing this. Because I'm not doing it for a platform or for fame. I'm doing it to serve. And she's the biggest reminder of being in service to this world, because I want to serve her, serve my community, and serve everyone.
I heard you say once about love and about your relationship with her, that love is not a passive thing, but it's something you actively do when you get up in the morning.
Yeah, love is a choice. It's a choice. And I think we get mixed up because sometimes we let our feelings be dictators and not indicators. I think our feelings are important to understand where we are, but they shouldn't let us make the decisions that we need to make. You got to get up and choose. I don't think she feels like being my wife every single day, but she gets up and she chooses me, you know, and I wake up and I choose her. And I think the same thing about this work, about Hamilton. You know, 8 times a week with injury, some days I'm like, I don't know how I can get through this, but I choose it. I choose it. I get up there and I choose it because there are people out in the world who need us, who need us to do the work so that they can be set free. And I'm a true believer in that. You got to get up and choose it. Love is a choice.
The role that you're playing was originated by someone who's been a hero of yours for far longer than Hamilton's been around.
Yeah.
Can you talk about Chris Jackson
Woo!
and your relationship with him over the years?
Yeah, I mean, so Chris Jackson is the reason I'm an actor. He's truly the reason I'm an actor. I was a poet. I was sort of, competing in national poetry slams. And,
You're a poetry champion.
Just a little something, just like, yeah, some all that. But yeah, no, so I was competing in poetry slam. And, I saw a couple of Broadway shows when I was a young kid, and I never saw myself in it. I always knew I was going to be a professional performer. I didn't know which avenues I was going to take, but I saw In the Heights in 2007 with my salsa dance team over at Edward A. Reynolds West Side High School, and they took our salsa dance team to the Off-Broadway Theater on 37th Street. Actually, that was right next door to this nonprofit organization called Urban Dove that I used to work with, so I knew the area really well, and I was like, what is this In the Heights, In the Heights? I'm from Harlem. I'm from Uptown. I rep it all day. And all my friends are from Washington Heights. I'm a native New Yorker, so I'm like, what is this Heights thing? And I saw it, and I was blown away. And all I see is this black man singing this sultry R&B on the stage, and I'm like, oh, there's room for me. There's really room for me. I never saw myself there, and it was our story. It was our story. A native New Yorker. I'm first generation. My parents are from Haiti, and to see this show filled with people who are immigrants who came to this country trying to make a better life, but at the same time, people who are first-generation Americans whose family brought them over so that they can give a better life to their children and their offspring. So when I saw Chris, I said, there's room for me. So I said, I'm going to do everything that Chris did. So I was like, I auditioned for AMDA. I was like, well, I guess I have to do musical theater, because it wasn't really theater and it wasn't really Broadway. It was, the story was amazing and it used the aesthetics that I loved. That was hip hop. It was verse. It was R&B. It was poetry to me. So it was less about like, oh, I want to be an actor so I can be this musical theater guy. Broadway wasn't the dream. Telling good stories was the dream, and that's what Lin did. So I always wanted to work on Lin's work, and I always wanted to do the things that Chris did. So I really just followed him, and I got a chance to meet him. My best friend Joshua Bennett performed with Lin-Manuel Miranda at the White House, and for their poetry night. And
when he premiered.
Yeah, when he premiered Hamilton, and my best friend, him and Lin got close, and Lin gave him a couple tickets to see In the Heights. And I had already seen it a couple. I was hustling. I mean, I was performing poetry on the train just so I could save up money to see the show. But we ended up seeing the show that night, and they brought us backstage for a tour, and I saw Chris coming down. So embarrassing. I saw Chris coming down the stairs, and I'm a hustler, so I'm like, "Hey, Chris, man, what's up, man? Listen, I just want to tell you, you're an inspiration in my life, man. I just want to say, I'm auditioning for grad schools and everything, not grad schools. I'm auditioning for, acting school and everything. I just want to say I love you, man." And he was like, "Man, thank you." That's how he was just so smooth. He was like, "Thank you," and man, we sort of became friends, so that we spoke on Facebook. He gave me sheet music for Benny's Dispatch when I was auditioning for musical theater programs and undergrad, and he's just been great, and he's really been like a guardian angel. There were times when it was rough for me, trying to be in this business, in this industry. I remember being in grad school, and while they were doing Hamilton down at the Public, he used to go to Fresh & Co., which was right, and it's right across the street from NYU. And I remember I was just so there, I was downtrodden, and all I look up and I see him, he doesn't even say hi. He goes, "Hey, just know that God wants to water you where you're planted." And I'm like, and then walks away. I'm like, "Chris, come back." Yeah, so he's just been so profound. He's just so profound.
My gosh.
When I got engaged, he called me. He was like, "Hey man, you know what you're doing? You know, do you know what you're walking into? Because marriage is a calling. Don't just do it because you feel it. You're called to be a husband." And I was like, so he's spoken in my life there. So yeah, I rarely get to speak with him, but every time I speak with him, it's something profound, and he's like changing my life. Yeah, he came to the theater the other day, and it was beautiful.
He watched you play George?
No, he just came to the theater just to say what's up to a couple people. And he was like, "You got a couch in your dressing room? Cool, I'm out." And then he left. It was great. But yeah, he's awesome.
I know. Speaking of your dressing room, I know you have a letter from him posted
Yeah.
next to your mirror, and he gave you his copy of the
the
George Washington bio by Ron
George
Chernow.
Washington.
That's got to
Ron
feel
Chernow.
special when you hold it in your hand.
It is, yeah. I put his letter right up on the wall just to remind me, I was a 17-year-old kid, dreaming of working, being a working artist, and I love him because he's a worker, man. He works, and yeah, so it was great. It was great.
Cool.
It was awesome.
So, how does that experience affect the way that you look at or interact with the Hamilton fans that you encounter? Do you have people coming up to you going, "Excuse me, sir, I really enjoy your work," and do you see yourself in them?
Yeah, I think I do a little bit, and sometimes I try not to put too much pressure on myself, but I do think it is a calling, and it is great to be on a platform in which you can speak into people's lives. I mean, especially for me, I love seeing Black and brown people in the audience. It's a game changer for me because they get to see their aesthetic on a stage that was once shunned. I remember being in undergrad, and I remember teachers telling me, "You will never have good speech for the American theater if you don't stop doing your spoken word rap thingy because it's giving you a bad accent and you can't do RP." And I remember that. I remember a teacher telling me, "Stop doing poems, stop doing verse because you won't work in the American theater." And now,
now that teacher's calling you for tickets.
Yeah, so now we have an aesthetic that was shunned, right? An aesthetic where hip hop started out because they were speaking out against large oppressions at the time. Gangster rap, emerged in the 90s when cats, in LA, were fighting because they felt oppressed.
Right. And
And now it's an aesthetic that's respected as a pedagogical tool to tell stories, and it wasn't. I would come to class and they would be like, "Hey, bring high art," and I'll bring a poem or I'll bring a rap, and they'll be like, "No, we mean like Shakespeare. What do you mean?" So now the aesthetic gets to get respected. The craft gets to be something that is worth being spoken about. So when I see Black and brown bodies in the crowd, they get to see themselves. And that's what happened with me. I got to see myself. It wasn't the theater. I got to see me. And I think that's important. So I think that's what I see.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you're certainly using the platform to speak out in that tradition of hip hop through your poetry. I would like to, we've got your book that's coming out on the 27th, Target Practice, and an EP of the same name. This is a volume of poetry that I thought, well, it's a pretty slim volume. I'll just sit down and read it and get through it. And I had to set it down 8 or 10 times just to process the work and the words.
Yeah.
It's so clearly there is no apology in this work, and there is no syllable that is not carefully chosen. And it brought to light for me a lot of things that I think I've been intellectually aware of and maybe socially aware of, but it hit me in the heart emotionally and set a fire under me to better understand the struggle of the Black man in America every time he so much as sets a foot out the door.
Yeah.
You, in some cases, are indicting the audiences that are paying for these tickets.
Yeah.
In fact, there was an incredible Huffington Post interview with you recently I believe the title was "You Can Star in Hamilton on Broadway and Still Fear for Your Life as a Black Man."
Absolutely.
And it is essential reading for everyone.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to talk to us about Target Practice and the goals that you set out when you began the project and how your involvement with Hamilton has either affected that or lifted it up or reinforced it.
Yeah, well, I want to shout out Laura Bassett, who wrote the article, or Huffington Post, who's actually here, who told my story. And me, I just wanted to talk about some poems, and she was like, "No, tell me about your whole life." And I'm so glad I got to share it. But Target Practice is a collection of poems and a 5-track EP that investigates violence against Black bodies, grief and mourning in light of police brutality against Black bodies, my experiences understanding race relations here in America as a Haitian American, as someone who's coming in with a narrative of Blackness from the Caribbean, and really my day-to-day experiences with racial injustice in the theater, in school, on the street, on the train, and me trying to reconcile really what these things feel like. I wrote it for Black and brown people who feel or felt like they never had the space to mourn and grieve. I was at a time when I felt like, I was hearing from the oppressor, "Hey, shut up, he deserved to die. Hey, he had a record." And then I was hearing from Black people like, "Oh, I don't want to hear anything about, these struggles, Black boy joy, Black girl magic." And I felt like I was in the middle. I didn't feel joy, and I felt like I needed to grieve and mourn, because that's the only way you can truly heal. So I wrote it for the people who felt like they didn't have the space to grieve and mourn, and I also wrote it for allies who want to know deeply what it is to exist in this body and walking down the street every single day. And I wrote it for the oppressor. I wrote it for the bigot, and I wrote it for the racist, so that they can have the mirror put to their face and understand the depth of the things they do and how it affects a whole marginalized group of people. So that's what the project means to me. And Hamilton is great, and Hamilton has won so many battles sort of with diversity and inclusion, but it was, so hard for me, especially on tour, going to the places that aren't so liberal, and walking out and just being reminded of certain things, the wealth gap in America, coming out, and I get to rap and I get to sing these songs, and I go out and it's just a sea of white people and no one looks like me. I have a poem in the book called The Great White Way that sort of explains it's a crown, so it's 8 different sonnets, and I did it for 8 different days of the week of different experiences that I had in the theater. But yeah, I have a whole bunch of stories of me sitting at dinner with my wife and a white woman just walking and saying, "Oh, your hair is amazing," and literally like shoving her hands in my wife's hair, or I have stories in there when I got pulled over by the cops, or me and a group of my friends, and we were unlawfully searched, unlawfully detained for no reason. I got stories of me walking by, a white woman on the train and her grabbing her bag and looking at me as if I would attempt to rob her. And the biggest thing for me is the genesis of this project started with the death of Philando Castile. I'm looking, who's from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I'm looking at this man who respected a lawful order, effectively communicated to the officer, "Hey, I have a firearm, it's a license, I just want to let you know," and still was murdered in the car with his girlfriend and his girlfriend's daughter in the back. And I had this revelation, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter about my social capital. It doesn't matter that I'm George Washington. It doesn't matter that I live in a nice building. It doesn't matter that I have 3 degrees. No matter what, existing in this skin, I could die at any moment. I could die at any moment. And realizing that, I was like, I gotta write, and I gotta write this. It started out as a play, and then it sort of developed into this collection of poetry and this music. And I had great producers, Chandre Broomfield, who is Mulligan Madison out on the Angelica tour. We did the music on tour.
Wow.
In a hotel room. After every night, we were like, all right, man, let's just get up in this room and let's work. And my second producer, I'm working with Mark Evan Diaz, who is fantastic. Actually, is the worship leader at my church, who I love dearly, who's a great friend, but also is a genius musician, graduate of Berklee School of Music. I was in his house until like 2 a.m., working on these songs, while doing the 8-show week. My wife is like, you better come home. So, it's just like, yeah, it's important for me to tell this story and to use this platform to tell this story. Yeah.
Well, we met up for dinner last week. I can't believe that's the first time we've met because I feel like I've known you so long.
Yeah, I watched all your videos. You did research on me. I did research on you. It was fantastic. It was
and the first question I asked you was, am I really the right person to be doing this interview about what it's like to be Black in America? And I'm really conscious of the fact that I am an outsider looking in on this story, and I feel honored that you are letting me in that way and letting me learn.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important because you have an audience that would never listen to me. And I hope that, they can hear. You have an audience of theater goers who, love your story, and you have an amazing story as well. And because you've spoken to everyone here in Hamilton, I thought, it would be a great ripe conversation for us to sort of, speak to the masses. So
well, if there's any platform I can use to help lift up the voices that might get heard a little bit less because of arbitrary things like skin color, creed, sexual orientation, any of that stuff, I want to use whatever platform I can to lift that up. And I will lift you up at every opportunity for the rest of my foreseeable life.
Thank you. That means a lot.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's an honor.
I can't wait till this book becomes available to the public, and the songs that you have produced to go along with them, I've listened to them countless times already. In fact, this morning, the first thing I did when I woke up was I kept my eyes closed and listened to all 5 tracks before I did anything else while I was still sort of in slumber, and it grounded me, it rooted me to come in and see you today.
Yeah, and the music is the music is interesting because it's not one aesthetic. The first track is hip hop. The second track is me doing a poem over a jazz trio. The third track is not even me. It's Jenny Harney Fleming, who's an amazing singer.
Those soaring
artist.
vocals.
Yeah,
Oh
and
God.
also who is the Universal Skylar Sister Standby. So she plays every sister in every company in America. So she's a fantastic, and it's a ballad of a black mother singing to her dead child. And then the fourth track is sort of like a pop gospel joint of a young black boy singing from heaven to his mother. And then the fifth track is sort of a love letter to everyone who has gone on and telling them that they haven't died in vain. So it really sort of listens as a play, if anything, than one genre of music. It's so many different genres because I'm using whatever genre to tell the story.
This is not light, fun content.
No.
It's so important, and I hope that whether it takes, doing a bunch of press, whether it takes being in Hamilton, which is so culturally acceptable now, I hope that so many ears and eyes will find your work. Yeah. And I mean, this is just the latest, but there's so much of your work dating back to 2006 and, on YouTube. No, look, it isn't embarrassing. And here's why. If you hadn't done all that stuff, you wouldn't have learned the lessons you need to make the art you're creating now.
Amen.
So
Amen.
never.
Come on, preach, baby, preach. Come on.
I say this all the time, and it's like my life's mission to remind people that being new at something is not the same as being bad at something. And if you don't start new at something, you'll never get good at it.
You're taking me to church, Laura? No, come on.
Well, you have taken me to church
all right.
On multiple occasions. I could talk to you for hours.
Yeah, forever.
But we are on limited time. I do want to get to one question from Twitter.
Okay.
And that is Shell My Bell wants to know, how are you planning to celebrate Black History Month?
Staying alive. Staying alive, loving people, loving God, doing this work. Staying alive. Yeah.
Sounds like the job for every month.
Yeah.
But look, I don't want to make light of it
Absolutely.
either. If I said that, it would be flippant and it would be gross.
Yeah.
But to hear you say that, I know that is something you think about every time you step out of the door.
Yeah.
And I want to think about my privilege of not having to think about that every time I step out the door in your honor and in honor of all of the Black men and women who have stepped out that door with fear and those who haven't come back.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Thank you.
It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
I adore you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Carvens.
Right, thank you.